All right, so you've probably heard the term the rapture thrown around, right? It's a massive deal in certain Christian beliefs. But here's the thing. There's this huge debate about one crucial detail. When does it actually happen? Today, we're going to dig into one of the most popular viewpoints out there, the idea that it all kicks off before a predicted period of worldwide chaos. So let's unpack the thinking behind that.
Okay, so before we can even get to the when, we've got to nail down the what. Let's start with the rapture. Now, this isn't just some vague spiritual idea. We're talking about a belief in a very specific future event, a moment when believers are literally, physically taken up from earth to meet Christ.
All right, and here's the second big piece of this puzzle, the tribulation. And listen, we're not just talking about a rough patch. The source material is super specific here. It's a prophesied 7-year stretch of intense global judgment and disaster. So how these two things, the rapture and the tribulation, fit together? Well, that's the big question we're diving into today. Which brings us right to the heart of it all. What's the timeline? What's the relationship between these two massive events? Does the rapture happen before the tribulation, smack dab in the middle of it, or does it only happen after all that chaos is over? Well, the source material we're looking at today argues pretty strongly for one particular option. And that option is what's known as the pre-tribulation view. I mean, the name kind of gives it away, doesn't it? But why people believe this? That's where it gets really fascinating. So the core belief is pretty straightforward. Believers are taken off the planet before that whole 7-year period of judgment even begins. They essentially get a pass. So the big question is, where does this idea even come from? Well, the source material we're looking at builds its case on 2 main pillars of reasoning. All right, so reason number 1. This one is all about a specific promise. A promise Jesus is said to have made to his followers about coming back to get them. So this verse from the Gospel of John, this is the bedrock for the first argument. The source text makes a really key distinction here. It says that when Jesus talks about coming again to receive you to myself, he's not talking about his final big return to rule on earth. No. Instead, this is seen as a direct reference to the rapture itself, a separate event to take believers to what the Bible calls the Father's house, which is, heaven. And what's really interesting is how they get to that conclusion. It's basically a process of elimination. The source argues, look, this promise can't be fulfilled at the end of the tribulation. Why? Because that moment is supposed to start a kingdom on earth, not take people to a home in heaven. Okay, so what about the middle? Well, the source says there's just no scriptural record of that happening. So if it's not at the end, and it's not in the middle, the only logical time left for this specific promise to be kept is before the tribulation even gets started. Okay, let's get to the second pillar of this argument. Now, this one's different. It's not about a single promise. It's about spotting a repeating pattern in some of the older Bible stories. It's a concept theologians sometimes call typology. And the source points right to this verse. You have Jesus himself comparing future events to the days of Noah. This is interpreted as a huge clue, basically an instruction to go back and look at that ancient story as a kind of blueprint for what's going to happen in the future. And this is where that pattern really comes into focus. The source highlights this clear 2-step sequence in the stories of both Noah and Lot. Think about it. Step 1, rescue. The righteous person is removed to safety. Noah gets on the ark, Lot gets pulled out of the city. Step 2, judgment. And only after they're safe does the judgment come down, the flood, the fire. The sequence is everything here. Rescue first, then judgment. So you see where this is going, right? The argument is that this rescue, then judgment thing, it isn't just a coincidence. It's presented as a divine pattern, a blueprint. The thinking is, if this is the model God used back then, it's the very same model he's going to use for the end times. The rapture is the rescue, and the tribulation is the judgment that comes right after. And this is the verse that really ties it all together, connecting that historical pattern directly to the future. That famous phrase, one will be taken and the other left, is seen as the modern version of those ancient stories. It's the same principle in action. Someone is removed to safety right before the judgment hits. Okay, so let's pull back for a second and just summarize. How do these two big ideas, this specific promise and this historical pattern, actually come together to build the case for a pre-tribulation rapture? It really boils down to these two core pillars. First, you've got the interpretation of that direct promise from Jesus in the Gospel of John. Through that process of elimination we talked about, the argument is that it has to happen before the tribulation. And second, you've got this historical pattern of rescue before judgment, seen in stories like Noah and Lot, which is presented as the consistent way God operates. So where does that leave us? Whether you land on this view or not, it's a really powerful example of how people find meaning in these ancient, complex texts. It really shows that sometimes the key isn't just what is written, but the framework you use to understand it. It makes you wonder, right? How much do the patterns we're looking for actually shape the answers we end up finding? Definitely something to chew on.